Hey guys, let's talk about marriage. And I want to tell you about a hidden time bomb that destroys a lot of marriages that can be hard to detect, especially in the early stages. And I'll give you a tool that you can use to see if the person that you're dating may or may not have issues like this that you should probably be aware of before getting into a long-term commitment with them. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that we're made. And it's something to be aware of. Now, of course, I'm a big fan of good marriages. A good marriage, it's like going to the casino and hitting the jackpot. And it can change your life for the better. Unfortunately, a lot of marriages aren't good marriages. Half of them split up, usually initiated by the woman. The other half of the marriages that stay together, well, they're not all blissful unions. But every once in a while, you find a couple who just mesh together really well, and they complete each other's lives, and the marriage is a beautiful thing, and it's one of the greatest treasures in life, if you can do it. Now, of course, having a good marriage depends upon a whole host of factors that have to be in alignment. And if those factors are not in alignment, you can have friction and trouble. And there's many things that can cause issues in relationships. But I'm going to focus on just one in this video. Now, I'm not an expert, but I am something of an engineer. And all of my life, I've looked at situations and systems and processes and tried to figure out what's really going on and how can we make this better? How can we optimize this situation? And of course, human relationships are among the most complicated things that I've ever seen, and I find it fascinating. So here's something that occurs to me that I want to share with you. A hidden time bomb in a relationship is traumatic wounds. Unfortunately, a lot of people, 20%, 25% of the population, have experienced some kind of significant emotional trauma. It could be terrible events that happened during childhood. It could be a terrible event that happened in a prior relationship. But when people go through severe episodes of emotional trauma, they're betrayed by somebody who they really trusted, or they're abused. It can shatter their world. And of course, everybody reacts differently. Everybody is unique. Some people are pretty good at having great emotional intelligence. They look at the situation and they can assess that they're simply a victim of circumstance. And there are some good people out there. There are some bad people out there. And it's not their fault. And they look at the situation and say, what lessons can I take away and move forward? And they're able to categorize all of this stuff in a pretty rational way and pull their life together, and it's not a problem for them in the future. But for a lot of people, it's an emotionally shattering episode. And our brain has protection mechanisms to save us from stuff like that. And one of them is disassociation. So sometimes people find themselves in terrible traumatic situations and they basically disassociate and almost like black out and don't even engage in that situation in a conscious way. They can also take all of those painful memories of that situation and shove it way in the back room in their brain, slam the door shut with a strong wall between all of that negativity, terrible emotional experience, and the rest of their life. And this is all subconscious. People aren't thinking about it. They're not thinking about it in words. It's just what the brain does to push all of that painful stuff that is too difficult to deal with out of the current space so that you can get on with your life. And they take all of that and they encapsulate it. They put it in a box and they shove it way in the back. Unfortunately, every once in a while, something will come up that will unlock the door. They'll be in a situation that has some analog to what happened previously that wasn't good, and those emotions of anxiety and fear and dread may bleed through where your brain is saying, I've been in this kind of situation before and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. And they react. For example, you could consider a person who, when they get into an elevator and they watch those doors slowly close in front of them, they start feeling anxious, maybe a feeling of dread. And they may even totally consciously be aware that there's no reason for this. The elevator, it's perfectly safe. They can see the other people who are riding along with them and they're just relaxed or having a conversation about work. But for them, it's like, I don't like this. It always makes me feel a little uptight when those doors close me in here. And if somebody asked them about it, they would probably just say, I don't know, those elevators, they just kind of freak me out. And if you say, why do they freak you out? They probably couldn't say. They probably couldn't make that connection. Because it's not a conscious thing, it's all subconscious. It's just certain circumstances trigger this person into an emotional reaction. And since it's subconscious, they don't know why, not unless they've done a lot of interpersonal exploration. And long-term relationships can definitely trigger past traumatic events, and that emotional baggage can come to the surface and be really corrosive to a relationship. So you might find yourself dating somebody and you think that there's great alignment between the two of you and that you found the perfect partner. And maybe in a lot of ways you have. But then once you get together in a relationship and the emotional bonds start to increase, one of the partners may be triggered by prior emotional trauma. And the things that can trigger that trauma would be getting too close. When the trust level gets a little too high, they realize that I trusted people before and I was betrayed. And so I don't want to trust too much because I might get betrayed again. Or at least that's happening subconsciously. They don't think this, but those are the feelings that come bubbling up. Or else there's conflict. You have arguments, you have concerns over finances, or other dramatic conflicting things start coming up, and that emotional soup can unlock the door to this prior trauma, and that comes forward and it injects emotions that are not helpful to the relationship. And what a lot of these individuals do is they build up big walls to keep the emotions behind that wall so they can deal. And so they end up being not super emotional people. Or when things get intense, they shut down. They don't want to share. They don't want to explore difficult emotional topics. When things get too close, they back away. And these sorts of relationships can end up as cold, sexless, distant, lonely relationships. So how can we identify people who might have this tendency? Now, I want to stress that I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's just a natural human protective system that we all have. And some people sadly have been through some pretty rough stuff. And that's just the way that they subconsciously are wired, the way they deal with it. And they're not trying to be evil or nasty or troublesome. They can't control it themselves. It's just how they react. Now, of course, you can always have the opportunity to work on yourself, to better yourself. And if you see these tendencies in yourself and you don't like it, well, you can explore therapy to try to get over that stuff. But of course, if you're 25, 35, 45 years old, you've been following these patterns for decades and trying to undo something that you've been doing for decades, it's going to be some work. So how can you tell if you're dating somebody who might be susceptible to these sorts of issues? Well, one of the questions I would ask is, what's your relationship history? And if they have a history of a lot of intense, short-term relationships that go astray, That's probably not a good sign. It's like, why do we have instability that prevents this person from having stable long-term relationships? And if that's been their pattern, well, the past tends to predict the future. And so do you want to hook yourself onto that ride? It's a question. But maybe more to the point, I would ask, so what happened with your last relationship? How did that go down? And if they respond with, well, the person I was with, they were just a dirtbag. They cheated on me and I can't have that, so I split. Or something to that effect. Or this person had these problems and they were just, a real bad person, and so I left. Well, I'd like to see my potential partner at least take some of the responsibility or have some introspection as to what caused the relationship to go from being a wonderful relationship in the beginning to how it ended. It didn't happen overnight. There was a progression here. And I'm not saying that maybe the person they were with was a bad person who did bad things and they felt they had to leave that situation. Totally possible. But almost all cases, there's some blame on both partners for why they weren't able to work it out, why they weren't able to correct course. And if the person that you're with is refusing to take any responsibility or any of the blame for the last relationship going asunder, well, maybe that's a personality trait that I don't want to get too deeply involved with. Because if your relationship doesn't end up well, it sounds like you're going to be taking all the blame if that's the case. And then finally, and maybe the most important question, is in your last relationship that ended, what'd you do to get yourself back on track? How'd you get over that? What did you go through after that relationship ended? Because a relationship is a big emotional commitment. You got a lot invested in it, and if it doesn't survive, if it falls apart, for most of us who are a little bit empathetic, who have a reasonable emotional barometer, that's difficult. That's really a gut punch. It's like losing a good friend or a cherished pet. It's like losing a job that you love. It has a big emotional impact. And so I would expect an answer saying that, it was really tough and they spent a good amount of time soul searching and trying to find who they were and figure out what happened. And it was difficult and painful and it took them some time to get through it. And maybe they ate a lot of ice cream and listened to Devo. I don't know. But if their reaction about their last relationship is, well, he was just a jerk and so I had to walk away. And how'd you feel about it? Well, sucked, but you gotta move on. If they don't show like they have really gone through a significant portion of emotional pain of breakup of their last relationship, that would be an indication that they have some big emotional walls built up inside that keeps that pain locked away. And they're pretty stoic, and they can't really feel that emotional impact. And that I would consider to be a significant red flag moving forward. And it's an indication that maybe these people have had trauma, and they've built up some real big emotional walls, which they can turtle behind and protect themselves from the real world. And those sorts of things can rear their ugly head later in your relationship and create emotional distance between you and your partner, and it ends up being a cold, loveless, roommate-like relationship that isn't very satisfying or joyous. Now, of course, like I say, it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that we're wired, the way that our human brain takes care of ourselves in these terrible situations. And it's certainly something that, with enough effort, could be fixed. Not easily fixed, but could be. So, ask your partner those questions if you're curious about whether or not this might be an issue going forward in your relationship. Of course, it's easy to overlook these signs in the beginning phases when everything is joyous and happy and you're in this honeymoon phase and there aren't really super deep connections built just yet, because that's safe and that's easy and that's fun. But when things settle down and you really start to depend on each other and you really start to build deep connections, that's when those triggers of vulnerability can come up. So I just wanted to throw this out because I don't see a whole lot of people talking about it, yet about a quarter of the population have been through some really tough traumatic situations, and those things can come back to the surface later in life and be super corrosive to relationships. So it's something to look out for. So that's my tip on the impact of prior trauma and how it can be corrosive to future relationships. I hope that you found it interesting and informative. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you like the content, consider subscribing to the channel and check out the other videos. If you found some real value here and you want to give back, throw me a super thanks. It's always super appreciated. Or join the channel for a few bucks a month and help support these efforts. Really appreciate you tuning in, checking out the video, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.